Hello, everybody, and hey, welcome to Blended Family Life. And I'm Jason. It's my wife, Susanna, and we're here this morning to talk a little bit about the process of blending a family. One of the things that we have to remember about blending a family is the foundational part of it, and that foundational part is that this is a spiritual fight that we're in.
Right.
Is as we would probably like to think, that the arguments and the things that we may encounter, with our spouse, children, and everything else, all the problems, we would like to think that they're solvable in our own flesh and by our own strength. But in all honesty, we have to understand that the foundational thing that the enemy of our souls is trying to do is trying to tear families apart. That's the process that he's in today's world is to tear the family apart. But if we can get down to the fact that this is a spiritual battle and that everything that we encounter as far as stress and anger and the anxieties and all the things, we need to understand that if we can get to the place where we can understand that it's within us, it's the spiritual realm that's around us that we're battling with every single day. If we can get to that and understand that, then we're the half the battle is won. And I want to just share a quick scripture with you. And it talks about the full armor of God and knowing the devil's schemes. It says that in verse 19, verse 6 in the book of Ephesians says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in might in his power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take a stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. And God goes on to say to put on the full armor of God, and he gives us, basic steps. And I'll let you go and read those things. But what I want us to understand today about this thing called spiritual, the spiritual war, the spiritual battle that we're in when we're blending our families, is the fact that the enemy is trying to do everything to rip us apart.
Right.
And we can see that in our culture today, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be the first step. If you're blending a family, if you've already blended a family, but maybe you're early on in the game, we just have a few things that we jotted down that we've learned together. I think that we both wish that we would have learned that it was a spiritual battle a little bit sooner because it's such our tendency, even as Christians, to try to do things in our own strength. And so it's so important to God always does us a favor and gets us back to the foundation and goes, oh no, let me remind you, you cannot do it in your own strength, and I'm just going to take you there.
That's right.
So definitely the first thing would be realizing it's a spiritual battle. The second would be lower your expectations. So we touched on this a little bit last time about how, when you're in love before marriage, you think that everything's going to be rosy, and then blended family life is a shock. Well, again, lower your expectations. Whatever you're going in expecting, from the children involved, from your spouse, just know it's going to be different than what you may believe it will be. Even with children, everybody has a desire to feel accepted. As adults, as children, I think even with adulthood, it's even a bigger issue. I know that me coming into the marriage, I wanted to be accepted by all the children. I wanted all the children to view me as mom and to want that relationship with me. But it is a process. And so, lowering that expectation that things may not be in your timing, things may not be according to the route or the plan that you wanted things to be is just so helpful in the journey.
That's right, and in lowering your expectation, I think one of the most important things is to look at the children because, one of the things I think that we battle with the most as step parents is wanting our stepchildren to come into this family and be accepting of us and be accepting in such a way that they call us mom or dad. And I think that's something that gives us, fulfillment, and knowing, or feeling like, hey, we're loved, we're accepted by the child. But in all honesty, lower your expectation in that realm and don't expect your stepkids to immediately just glob onto you and love you and just begin to call you mom or dad. You got to remember this one principle, and I'll go back to one of our first videos that we did is that the children are lagging behind us about a year, okay? So, we're always as adults and as remarried parents about a year ahead of where our children are. And so, they're still trying to cope and trying to to grasp the change in their life and all the complexities of what has taken place, whether the remarriage is from a divorce, or the remarriage is from a death of the family or an abandonment situation. The kids just don't quite understand that dynamic and the things that are going on, and they're trying to process those things in their minds. And that being the case, they're kind of lagging behind just a little bit. So we as parents need to allow them to catch up, if you will, and allow them to process things along their own time, and not to try to rush them or hurry them by telling them, well, you better call her mom, or you better call him dad, that's just not something that you want to pressure your children into doing. You have to allow them that time to process everything that's going on and talk about those things, and to allow them to move on in the way that they need to move on.
Right. And you'll notice that all children are different. There are some children that immediately latch on. They're looking for that parent to fulfill their life. And then you'll have others that it takes a really long time. That was how ours were. We had a couple of older kids. One immediately latched on and wanted to call the parent dad or mom. And the other one, it was a process. And so just understand that they all grow at a different rate.
That's right.
They're not, they're not uniform. Every child is different, just like every adult is different. And so just allowing them to be themselves and not to judge one child by another child's progress. Because, if you have that child that's progressing and they seem to just be embracing the family, and then you have that one that just is lagging behind, not to compare the two and to just understand that they're in two different places.
Yeah.
Another thing would be allowing your kids to talk about the previous life. That is huge. That's one of the biggest battles that we faced when we first got married. Again, call it selfish, call it what you will. When you first have a marriage, you want everybody to embrace,
what's
both
right?
With our children. That was one of the first things that we began to realize when we got married was, wow, these kids are still stuck in the past, kind of like what Jason just said. Both of our older two kids, we have one that's now 12, one that's 11, and at the time they were 8 and 9. And, at that point, they both wanted to sit around the dinner table with us and talk about, oh, Mom, you remember that time
reliving the past.
That, we and our other family with our other dad went and did this, and then Jason's daughter, Dad, remember that time that me and Mom and you went and did this? And so there's a constant reminder that there was a previous family and a previous life prior to the life that you now live. And as adults, again, wanting the family to be unified and just wanting to move on, it can be so challenging because you're like, oh, I just want them to be in the moment. But to understand that children are just not there.
Right.
And it is a process. And to try to learn not to have any ugly feelings towards it. Because if you're not in a blended family, you're probably watching this and going, well, that seems common sense. But you don't understand. Until you're in a blended family, until you understand that all you want is to be unified and to be connected as a family, you don't understand how that makes the family unit feel. It almost makes you feel like there's people that are still a part of the home that maybe don't even live there. And so it can be very, very frustrating. I mean, when you just want the whole family unit to just blend and bond. But just to remember that these children do need time to get there.
Right, yeah, and allowing them to embrace the old life still, and to still understand and process through that. That's so important, and one of the main things, and the next point I'd like to talk about just real quick is backing the other parent up. When it comes to discipline, that's probably one of the hardest things that I faced in the marriage. That my wife is more the disciplinarian in the family. I discipline, don't get me wrong, but she's very strict. Moms, and rightfully so, right? Because moms run the home. And I needed to give her space to do that, of course. But in doing that, I needed to be there to back her up, especially with my child. When she would discipline my child, I very quickly, there's a term, in this thing called blended family that blood becomes thicker. You tend to think that as the step parent is disciplining the stepchild, you feel like that they're doing it in a way that is not showing love, kindness, or you not even, maybe not even favoring that child in a sense, because that child is not the blood, and then the step parent of that child, begins to, feel like, well, this is unfair, the way that the step parent is disciplining my child, and you begin to do things that are not conducive to keeping the marriage solid and on a good foundation. And I did that. I made that fatal mistake early on in our marriage, and I didn't support my wife in a lot of ways when she would discipline my daughter, and it became detrimental to our marriage. It became detrimental to the discipline of her. And so I cannot stress enough the importance of supporting each other. We have to come first in this marriage.
Right.
We have to be the ones that are together and on the same page. You have to be together and on the same page with your spouse when it comes to disciplining the children in the home. And again, I can't stress that enough, because division, and going back to the spiritual warfare that we're talking about, the enemy is trying to do one thing. He's trying to divide the family. That's what he does. He is a divider. He splits things, and if he can divide and conquer, then his mission and what he's trying to do, his purpose is being fulfilled. And so when we realize this, that the spiritual battle was about dividing us, and the enemy was using this disciplinary thing that of me not supporting my wife in that, we soon found out that when I came into alignment with her and supported her, even though maybe I disagreed with some of the punishments, we begin to talk about these things in private and talk about and work these things out, pray about these things, not in front of the children, not doing these things in front of the kids. And that's so important. Please understand this one principle. Do not argue and fight about the discipline of either child in front of the children, one to another, because that right there is giving that child ammunition. And children don't understand in their minds what they're doing, in a sense, or what it's going to do to tear the family apart. And so again, if I can encourage you in any way, support the parent that's disciplining, be there, do not disagree in front of the child. Work things out and pray and watch God do amazing things. If you can understand that this is the spiritual battle, the division that we were talking about at the very beginning of the video.
Right. And we've discussed several times how, and there's this phrase in a book that we read that we're going to share with you guys, but anytime there's issues, like you said, blood gets thicker. And we've really embraced this thought since we started learning about this whole blood is thicker thing. Because we both do this and we don't realize it. We know that we can feel our child's feelings, okay, in a way that we both have realized the other person cannot. And so, if Jason's correcting one of my children, I can literally sense and feel their sadness or whatever they're feeling because they're in trouble. Yeah. And so this has been a huge opportunity for growth in our life. It still is.
Or it can be a source of contention as well.
Or contention, growth / contention, whatever you want to call it. But just understanding that your feelings may be faulty. Now, of course, we're not condoning any kind of situation where someone is abusive to a child whatsoever, but just simply things like putting them in timeout or putting them in their room or whatever the case may be, that other parent can still feel like, well, that's unfair. And I can tell you today that we would not have survived this marriage if it were not the fact that we have supported each other in discipline. It is the single most destructive thing, I think, out of everything that you can have going on in your home in a blended family. If you are not supporting the other person, it will not succeed.
That's right.
That does not mean you have to agree. I know Jason touched on that, but I just want to reiterate that. You cannot agree, but if you can just cool off for 10 seconds, wait till you get behind closed doors and then talk about it and work those things out. Yeah. That is the best way to handle it, because that is what's going to get your marriage into a place where it's going to last.
That's right.
The number one thing, I have a lot of friends that are in blended families, and that's the number one issue, is that they say my spouse doesn't support me, or the rules in our home don't apply to their children. And that just cannot work. All rules have to apply for all children.
It'll rip a marriage apart.
Right, and so it can be a struggle even for the children to come together. If there's one that's been used to being an only child, and then now they're one of 3 or 4 children, that is a struggle as well. But just understanding, always supporting each other and having the rules for all the children.
Yeah.
And finally, I would just say, if you have a local pastor in your area, if you have a counselor, if you just have a friend who's walked through this, maybe a more senior person who has a lot of wisdom, I just encourage you, don't try to do this on your own.
Yeah.
You can, but it is a struggle. The more that you can have a godly person, someone in your life that's really walking with you along this journey, the better it will be for you. And then, of course, like Jason mentioned, just praying. That is the number one thing. I think sometimes in our society we tend to limit the power of prayer in our own minds. But to really understand that prayer is so powerful, and it really does change things.
Yes,
we would never do one of these sessions without praying first, because we know that in and of ourselves, we are not able to speak any of this.
That's right.
We would just draw a blank, but with God, He is able to not only speak through us, Lord, but also speak into your lives. And we're just so thankful to the Lord for all that He's doing. And so I just encourage you, pray for your family. Don't let a day go by that you don't wake up with your spouse and pray. It's so important.
That's right. That's right. And the Lord says this: it's not by power, it's not by might, but it's by my Spirit. Thus says the Lord. Amen.
Yes.
So just remember that. And again, we thank you guys for joining us today, and have a great day.
Yes. Thank you.